Beepity boppity boopity bop. Good morning, world, and all who inhabit it. Feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would feel without. Welcome to another morning. Today is Thursday, August 25th, 2021. The Truth Hurts Day. A Thursday. Here every morning on Pal Go On, where we talk about feeling so good from the inside out. Using that amazing window to this godlike experience you are. You're feeling so amazing as we stretch our self-awareness like a muscle today. Wherever you are, whenever you are, whenever you are thou, whenever thou art. I hope you have been able to feel the weight of the body down the front of the spine and into the rainbow arches like at all of the times. Today, as usual on Pal Go On, we talk about some things that might be a little bit difficult to talk about without a little bit of guided breathing, but today we give you some tools, as usual, some body magic tricks, if you will, to feel so great in that body of yours. So we'll be right back to talk about hyper responsibility and how that's a good thing. Wherever you guys are, whenever you guys are, whether you are sitting in the bed, whether you are just kicking those sheets off just now, whether you still got a song in your head from last night, or whether you are chilling in the afternoon. Where are you right now? How are you? How are you? Is it warm where you are? Is it cold where you are? How art thou? Are you able to look around? Have you been able to integrate with the area around you? What has it been like where you are? Are you having a great day? How is your sense of self feeling today? Your sense of self, as in, if you pretend that there's a candle with me in front of the lips that you're trying to not put out, and to leave your swallowing muscles alone as you do so. Just think about putting a candle in front of your lips. You know, don't think too much about breathing in or out. Just imagine the candle in front of thy lips that you might not be trying to put out. It's just flickering there. Like 1 or 2 inches away from your mouth, from your lips. Just flickering there. You're trying to not put it out. But you're not thinking about breathing in, you're not thinking about breathing out. There's just a candle there. And you're trying to not put it out as you leave your rare swallowing muscles alone. Again, if you would with me, with your first podcast in 3D, please pretend that there's a candle in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out. It's just flickering there, like 1 or 2 inches in front of your lips. And you're trying to not put it out. It's just flickering there. You're not thinking about breathing in. You're not thinking about breathing out. It's just flickering there, but you're trying to not put it out. You're not thinking about your breathing as you leave your swallowing muscles all the way alone. And just observe your sense of self as you leave that candle about 1 or 2 inches away from your lips. It's just flickering there. It's just flickering there. You're trying to not put it out. As you leave your swallowing muscles alone. And how does that feel for you? How does that feel for you? Again, if you would one more time. Simply imagine that there's a candle in front of the lips, just flickering there, a lit candle, a small little flame that you're trying to not put out. As you leave your swallowing muscles alone and observe your sense of self as it's happening. And how does that feel for you? And how does that feel for you? Does your sense of self, is your kinesthetic experience, that body, that consciousness of yours, that background to this experience of yours, does that shift in any way as you're again? One last time, if you would, even just say it with me in your head, if you can. Just say it with me in your head. Pretend that there's a candle in front of the lips that you're trying to not put out. Remember that it's just there. You're not thinking about breathing in, you're not thinking about breathing out. And then say it with me, even if it's just in your head. Leave your swallowing muscles alone. As we observe our sense of self today and stretch our self-awareness like a muscle, like every morning. Here on Pago. Where are you right now? Are you driving? Are you in the car? You looking outside? You hanging out with your friends at the bar? You drinking or you eating right now? What you doing right now? How are you? Are you ready to talk about some hyper responsibility? How are you? We're just chilling here every morning. It's just 5:52 a.m. Getting ready to be so productive out there worldwide. Over 6 billion people in the world. You are one part of this gigantic body of 6 billion people in the world, but these 6 billion people of the world, there's just one body composed of 6 billion little parts, like your body is one body composed of all these little bones, right? You are but one little joint in this gigantic body of these over 6 billion people, are you not? They say that a hole the size of your soul is left in society when you are not yourself, when you're not performing to your complete self. And they say that you die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with a breath you take. Are you starting to see how important you are? Are you starting to see how important you are, your actions to yourself, to your world around you? Your decision to be here on and listening to Pago On, do you see how fortunate you are? Do you see how great it is to put yourself at the center, because do you see how important you are? As we die every 5 minutes and that counter is reset with a breath, isn't your life so important to yourself? So isn't that breath so important to yourself? Every 5 minutes your body has to go through a new life cycle? So maybe your choices towards getting a better breath are more important than we thought. As they are life and death, as we are life and death every 5 minutes. A breath is life and death because we are life and death every 5 minutes, right? One more time. A breath is life and death because we are life and death every 5 minutes, right? As we die every 5 minutes, but that counter is reset with a breath. So you and your actions are so important to your whole world, because your whole world is affected by you. As in, your entire world is defined by what you affect, right? So how you affect yourself ultimately affects the world that you care about, because how you affect yourself is going to affect how your breathing is. And society has a hole in the shape of your soul, missing from it when you are not there, when you are not being yourself, when you are not when you are not choosing to breathe properly so that you can be your authentic self. So wherever you are right now, whether you're at the pool or you're at the park with your pockets full with money, or if your pockets are just full of your hands, if you're looking around at the people outside who might be familiar or they might be unfamiliar, or maybe you're just inside twiddling your thumbs, listening away, wherever you are you remembering to put a candle in front of the lips that you're trying to not put out? Ooh, and leave those swallowing muscles all the way alone. Today we talk about hyper-responsibility and why it's a good thing. You see online right now, if you look up hyper-responsibility, it's often associated with OCD, often associated with negative things, this idea of hyper-responsibility. Now, what exactly is hyper-responsibility? What would you think hyper-responsibility to mean? With a word like hyper-responsibility, what would you think that to mean? But with a word like hyper, which usually means over the top, one would think that hyper-responsibility means taking too much responsibility for things. Which would then not be surprising why it shows up in the OCD section when you Google it. But hyper-responsibility, yes, although it may seemingly seem like a mental issue, rather such could also be a spiritual issue. And hyper-responsibility could in fact be a good thing. How could it be a good thing? Because what are we looking to do in life? To have no fear. Why would you want to have no fear? To be free. Because any person who has fear is not free, right? Because you are not able to do or think or believe or feel anything that is related to the thing that you are afraid of, because your body naturally avoids those things, which is naturally what fear does. So how do we achieve more freedom in life to feel amazing, to feel so free in our amazing godlike body, in our amazing window to this godlike experience that we are? How do we do that? How do we feel so free in our lives? How do we get this freedom, this quote-unquote freedom? You have to fear nothing. Otherwise, anything that you fear, anything reminding you of that fear, locks you down into slavery again. Into a slave to the fear, a slave to fearing death and not life-loving. A fear of death defining you, as opposed to a freedom of choice, aka a life-loving attitude. A loving of what is there and not of what you think could be. Because loving what is there allows you the spirit to create and achieve things that you wanted, as opposed to looking at those things, imagining things that you wanted. The energy provided to you by appreciating and loving what is there around you right now, the energy provided to you allows you the amount of energy you would need to go get those things that you don't even know that you want yet. A wait-and-see attitude goes a long way for this hyper-responsibility thing. Why would you want to be hyper-responsible? Why would you want to feel overly responsible for things in your life that happen that might not be your problem, that might not be your quote-unquote responsibility? Does that mean you have to go out and save every homeless person? Does that mean you have to go out and give all of your food to everybody? No. But things that happen to you and things that happen that you care about, should we take hyper-responsibility, what happens is that we end up living without fear. Why? It might be scarier to perceive everything that happens to you as your fault, as you deserving all of it. It might be a fearful or frightful thing to think about. But why would you want to do it? Why would you want to see everything as your responsibility? Well, because you live a life that is fear-free. A life that is free of fear. Why? Because no longer is anything in anyone else's hands. There's a calmness that comes with knowing. There's a calmness that comes with knowing who to look to when an issue arises. And if it's always the self, it's consistently always the same answer, and it's consistently secure. Fear free, as you immediately know where to begin looking. We will be right back to talk more about hyper responsibility and feeling so great from the inside out, using some body magic tricks with the help of the Best Feeling Network. This has been your only no nonsense podcast. This has been Pal. Go on. We'll be right back.
You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Every day, once a day, give yourself a present. Don't plan it, don't wait for it, just let it happen. It could be a new shirt at the men's store, a cat nap in your office chair, or 2 cups of good, hot, black coffee. Like this. A present. Like Christmas. Oh, man, that is the spot. Nothing like a great cup of black coffee.
Using our sense of the world to make the sense of the world. World peace through individual inner peace, inner strength. Feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would feel without. How art thou doing? Welcome back, everybody. Wherever you are, whether you are driving in a car, whether you are walking downtown or walking by the beach, are you playing guitar or just feeling the wind across your feet? Across your brow, how are you? Are you with your friends or are you just hanging out? Sup, friends? Sup, alone time? What is your vibe like today? Have you been on YouTube yet? Have you been on Spotify? What you been up to? Been in the water? Not been in the water. You've been dry all day. Have you drank water yet? Have you drank water yet? Have you been able to pretend that there's a candle in front of the lips that you're trying to not put out and leave your swallowing muscles all the way alone as you do so? Suspending the crown gently by threading this with blah 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 blah. How's your sense of self felt? Today we talk about hyper responsibility. But one more time, wherever you are, if you would with me, on the first podcast in 3D, would you please pretend with me that there is a candle in front of thy lips that you're trying to not put out? It's just flickering there. It's just flickering there and you're trying to not put it out. But you're not thinking about inhaling, you're not thinking about exhaling too much, you're not thinking about inhaling too much. But there's just a candle, just 1 to 2 inches floating in front of the lips. And you're trying to not put out. And of course, leave the swallowing muscles alone as you do so, and just observe your sense of self. Let your eyes soft focus if that's what needs to happen. Let them close or soft focus. Anchor the tip of the tongue to the back of the bottom incisors as we once again pretend that there's a candle in front of the lips that you're trying to not put out. And to leave your swallowing muscles alone. Those are just flickers there. Where are you right now? Are your eyes closed? Are you soft focusing? Are you allowing these words to go in one ear and out the other? Are you sitting down, lying down? Is your head facing to the side or is it facing straight? You might ask yourself, how light does my head feel? Does my head feel cocked to the left or the right now? You might even ask yourself, am I feeling present in the moment or am I feeling like I'm locked in the future or the past? Is my body able to be more integrated in the moment and feel more active areas of consciousness? Is it able to activate more areas of consciousness in the present moment? To feel so whole, or am I feeling fragmented? Are we feeling fragmented or are we feeling whole in our bodies today? Do we feel like our body is providing us the energy in the proper areas and states of consciousness of our bodies to allow us to be authentically in the moment, to feel present and whole in the moment? Are we allowing ourselves to activate all of our locales of consciousness in our bodies together in this moment to feel present and to not feel fragmented into different thoughts that may be results of some trauma, possibly inlaid in fear within the body, which feels like being trapped, right? As fear feels like slavery. You are not free to make choices when you're afraid of things, right? So how can we be never afraid of nothing? How do we go about being never afraid so we can be always free? Tomorrow. On Freedom Friday. On the Truth Hurts Day. How do we, on the Truth Hurts Day, which is today, Thursday, 6:08 a.m., August 25th, 2021, is another Truth Hurts Day. And how do we go about having no fear while taking hyper responsibility? Well, Herbie, they tell me online hyper responsibility is a bad thing. It's a mental anxiety issue. Well, I mean, that's not the first thing that they call a mental anxiety issue. That's completely normal these days, right? Could it be that this is just part of the human experience? Could it be that this might just be another part of the human spirit that we are trying to over-intellectualize instead of confronting head on? But let's confront it head on. We all have this feeling of possible hyper-responsibility, and we're all a little bit afraid to jump over the edge and say it's true. This idea that everything that happens to you and around you is your fault might not be true in the outer sense that, yeah, it's not your fault, it's not legally your fault, you're not going to get arrested for something that you see on the street that you disagree with. It might not be your fault that your significant other or whatever, quote unquote, cheated on you. It might not be your fault directly. It might not be your fault directly that you have not as much of an appetite as you would like to, and people always make fun of you for being skinny or something, or the opposite. It might not be your fault that you've inherited these traumatics, these fears, or these obsessions, or these phobias from people who raised you, or just the way you were raised. It might not be your fault that those things happen to you. However, what is the point of viewing any other thing? What is the point of casting responsibility onto anybody else but yourself? How productive is it for yourself? Doesn't the human spirit know that? Doesn't the human spirit know that about the self? Isn't that why we have kind of a feeling of hyper responsibility within our bodies? Don't we kind of already know that there is something about us having responsibility, at least in some part, to ourselves in everything that happens to us? Oh, this bad thing happened to me. I got jumped, or I got physically assaulted, or whatever, whatever. Well, why were you in that situation in the first place? Doesn't it take time for you to be in most situations? To be in any awful situation, doesn't it take months? Most of the times. To end up in situations in which a bad situation could even get to you. Hyper responsibility is less about a feeling of responsibility, but rather an orientation towards a truth, which is, should you want to get the things you want in life, isn't an active role in it the best way to get there? Yes, it might not be your fault that this issue might be arising in this vacation that you're having with your family unit, and you care about this vacation because it affects you. Yes, it might not be your fault that the vacation is going awry. Maybe it's Fava, maybe it's Mama, maybe it's a cousin. However, don't you want your vacation to be awesome as well? So shouldn't you take responsibility and do what you can to help ease the situation, for it is your vacation as well. And if you want a great vacation, well, casting the responsibility onto someone else and waiting for that is a good way to live in fear, as you are constantly allowing the state of your world to be defined by somebody else. And yet you care about your world, and yet you care about your experience, right? Wherever you are right now. Are you chilling at the mall? Are you on vacation right now? Or are you maybe studying at work? Maybe you're just hanging out with your friends. Maybe you're eating chips right now. Maybe you're drinking water or soda. Maybe you're actually feeling pretty satisfied and feeling pretty happy. And you're like, yeah, this is a great day. I'm happy to be here. Happy to listen to the podcast. This is awesome. Maybe that's where you're at. Maybe you're already feeling free. Maybe you're already feeling you have no fear. But to orient ourselves towards thinking that things that happen to us is our responsibility might be scary at first, but ends up being the more energizing worldview. As no longer are things out of your control. Yeah, maybe it might be scary because you might not like some of the things that are there, that you see, that you might have to engage with, but no longer is the confusion existing of who is to look to. We always look to the self. What energy could be spent better anywhere else but the self? As we know most about, though we still know very little about, we know most of what we can know about of the self. At least unconsciously. We might need to take hyper responsibility, because what good is there spending energy in putting responsibility onto anyone else, as that is not a skill that will transfer further and further in the future, as you cannot just willy-nilly apply certain rules to certain people and the same rules to other people, as everybody's different. However, you are this constant node in your life, this constant center pole of gravity in your life that you can continuously work on, that you can continuously aim, that you can continuously shape, that you can continuously mold, strengthen. So when problems happen in life, when we see that we are needing to overcome, whether that be relationships, whether that be our jobs, whether that be not being able to pay rent, whether that be not being able to pay off your car. Oh, it's my mom's fault, or it's the guy down the street. He looked at me funny and that affected my life. Okay, but how were you able to be affected that way? Taking hyper responsibility means looking at yourself and saying, okay, well, Why was I affected that way? Well, they made me scared. Well, why was I scared? Well, they made me nervous when they looked at me. Well, why were you nervous? Did you lack the confidence in yourself? Well, they distracted me. Well, why are you so easily distracted? It's not so much that other people do not have responsibility in what happens. It's that what good is the energy spent in defining what that is, and what good can come out of the energy spent on looking at what you could have done better to improve the situation towards what you wanted. And so the next time that situation happens, you can actually have an active role and get more of what you want next time. Isn't that true? Whether you are shopping at the mall right now, or you are just looking through some clothes online, or whether you are kicking back. What good comes from energy placed in trying to look for ways as to how it's not your fault? And what good, in opposite, and conversely, what good comes from placing all the energy in looking at what you could have done to improve that situation, regardless of whether or not you would have been perfect at it, or whether or not it was your quote-unquote responsibility according to what society has been telling us. In any situation, social, jobs, or anything like that. We'll be right back. How does that feel for you? About the energy of placing it on yourself. And what you could have done, despite whether or not thinking that it was your obligation to do so. We'll be right back. Welcome back, wherever you are, wherever thou art. Hope you're feeling so good from your head down to your toes, down to your heels, up to your heart. As we're stretching our self-awareness every day like a muscle out there. Out there worldwide, whether you are in Switzerland, Kuwait, Antarctica, where you are, wherever you are, North America, South America. Please pretend with me that there is a candle in front of the lips that you're trying to not put out. It's just flickering there. as you are leaving your swallowing muscles alone. You are one part, you are one experience in this gigantic land. 6 billion people also doing the same thing as you, though. But we are all one big population, but our one population is composed of each of us individually. You deserve everything you get on the Truth Hurts Day. On the Truth Hurts Day on Palgo1. Welcome back, everybody, on the Truth Hurts Day on Palgo1 today on August 25th, 2021, Thursday. We say, you deserve everything you get. Yeah, the truth might hurt. The truth might hurt, but why? Because the truth will set you free tomorrow on a Freedom Friday. But today we talk about the truth hurts. How the truth hurts. It hurts so good, though. But it hurts so good. As you are once again, please pretend with me on your only podcast in 3D with one candle. A lit candle in front of your lips, wherever you are. A lit candle in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out. Whether you're drinking or hanging out. And leave your swallowing muscles alone. And just observe your sense of self as that happens. Don't judge it, whether it goes this way or that way. Just observe, you know? Simply observe. Are you remembering to just observe? Hyper-responsibility. Hyper-responsibility. What if you took hyper-responsibility and that's a good thing? You see online right now that if you Google hyper-responsibility, it's often associated with OCD and stuff like that. But might it be a natural part of the human spirit, like many other things that we often castigate to being mental illness? Like having a low attention span as a child. And then deciding to dope these children up with all sorts of drugs. Might it just be a part of the human spirit, this idea of hyper-responsibility that we just needs to learn how to deal with and orient towards? Maybe we have this feeling of wanting to be hyper-responsible as a human being, as in maybe we have this feeling of feeling responsible for everything that happens to us, around us, and to the world that we care about. But perhaps that's a good thing that we feel that hyper-responsibility. Perhaps that's just a natural part of the human spirit. Perhaps it's a good thing that we feel hyper-responsible. Why? Because it gives you a place to begin looking to where to change. Oh, should I change this? Should I change that? Should I look at this? Should I try to improve that? Should I try to fix this? The answer is you. Hyper-responsibility makes it so the decision-making is very clear, cut and dry, not scary, very clear, cut and dry, not uncertain, very clear, cut and dry, and stable, and not uncertain. Hyper-responsibility makes it so that we live with no fear, as the fear always comes from unknowing, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing what to do, not knowing where to place the blame, not knowing who's to blame, not knowing this, not knowing that. Hyper-responsibility gives you one step closer each and every time to reduce those questions, reduce the amount of those stressful questions. Where do you begin? The answer is always myself. Let's live without fear. The answer is always myself. Now let's begin without fear, because the answer is always myself. There's no not knowing, but the answer is always myself. Where do we begin? Myself. It might not be my fault that it might not be my fault that that person down the street, that person at that corner when I was turning in my car, it might not be my fault that they yelled and screamed because they're having a bad day. But hey, maybe I was coming at that stop intersection a little bit quick and I was kind of looking a little bit threatening. Maybe I was. Maybe I could have left my house earlier so that I wouldn't be stuck in this traffic with all these angrier people who are also late for work. Maybe if I was not looking at my car radio, but instead looking at the road, I would have been driving more efficiently and would have gotten past this stop sign way earlier. Yes, you can't. Yes, maybe not all of those individual instances that happen throughout the day are not your responsibility. However, as we're all trying to get more of what we want, should we take more responsibility in looking at ourselves in every situation? Do we not set ourselves up to get more success for what we want, or what we know we want more in the future of? By taking hyper responsibility, don't we properly set ourselves up for success in the future? As we are examining ourselves and seeing how we could have done better. Better in what way? Towards something that we wanted. How do we do that? By examining ourselves. How do we examine ourselves? Well, wherever you are, whether you are kicking your feet, whether you are rollerblading right now, whether you are in the sun or on the top of a rooftop or spinning down underwater, I want you to please pretend that there's a candle in front of the lips that you're trying to not put out. There's just a candle. Wherever you are, there's just a lit candle in front of the lips. Say it with me, even if it's in your head. Pretend there's a candle in front of the lips. Even if it's in your head, just say it with me, that you're trying to not put out. And one more time, if you would, just say it with me, even if it's in your head. Leave your swallowing muscles alone. And how does that feel for you? How does that resonate with you? Does that feel like something familiar or new? Are we reacquainting ourselves with ourselves? So we can know more about ourselves and watch ourselves. Why? So when we take hyper responsibility, it's not so scary. Because we can see what we want to see. We could see what we need to see. Yeah, we could take hyper responsibility in the world, and that's a good thing. As you can then have control over what's happening in your life. Not living in fear of constantly wondering, is it this person who's now going to upset my life? Is it that person who's now going to throw my life off the rocks or into the rocks? Is it that person who's now I'm going to wait for to make sure that I have happiness in life? Or better yet, examine what makes you happy in life and continuously take active decisions towards that. Hyper responsibility for you what you want. Hyper responsibility. So that you get more of what you want. Not so that you can beat yourself down. Not so that you can feel like a victim. Oh, I was responsible and I failed there. I was responsible and I failed there. No, but rather I was responsible so I can do something about it. I was responsible so I can do something about this. There is something that I can do. There is something that I can affect what I want somehow. Some way. There has to be. There is no energy well spent anywhere else but looking at the self. There has to be. There has to be a way I can contribute towards getting my happiness again. That's the only way this energy is best spent. Any energy spent in wishing or trying to control another person to do something so that you get what you want. Well, you know how well that works on you. You know that you cannot be controlled in that same way, so how would it work on anyone else? The best energy is spent on looking at the self. We should take hyper responsibility for everything we want so that you can get closer and closer to your happiness every day and have an active role in that. Get closer and closer towards what you want and have an active role in that. As we suffer in silence, the more we cause other people, or the more we deem other people as responsible for giving us what we want in life, the more and more we suffer as we suffer in wait, in uncertainty whether or not we will finally get what we want. But when we take hyper responsibility, we are constantly taking consistent, persistent, reliable action towards getting what we want. So that getting what you want is not an act of faith, but rather an act of love, an act of action, an act of knowing. As you built your way towards that, and no one gets old in a day, so no one will forget in a day like that. No one gets old in a day. So as we're taking hyper responsibility for our lives, are we not making more and more decisions which set us up towards success of getting more of what we want in life? Compared to the opposite, which is waiting and anticipating, hoping that somebody else will come along and give us what we want. How good can you get at hoping? Well, you can only hope so much. And hope will only get you so far, as it doesn't actually affect anything necessarily. Whether you are hanging with the family, eating dinner right now, or maybe you are walking the dogs. Hyper responsibility, not as in, oh my gosh, it's my fault, but oh my gosh, I have a say in this. Now it's just a matter of finding how. We'll be right back. Right after this break, we'll finish off talking about hyper responsibility. How you deserve everything you get. That's a good thing. Pretend as a candle. We'll be right back. World. Pagawan. Wherever you are, whenever you are, whether you are watching here right now or whether you are there in the future in a pod. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for coming through. I hope you're able to feel so great in that window to this godlike experience that you are, this vessel, this amazing body that you are. Feeling so great, remembering to allow all of these words to go in one ear and out the other. And you might be wondering what this picture behind me is. Well, it's a picture of you from the inside out. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you. A big shout out to you and your body feeling so good from the inside out. And your superpower of self-awareness. What do we mean by your superpower of self-awareness? As in, aren't you able to place your awareness onto the idea that your weight of the body is not actually being placed, or does not actually prefer to be placed into this tailbone, little tailbone, but rather following these blue lines from the front of the spine. Counter what you would think, right? Not the back of the spine, but the front of the spine. The weight bearing portion of the spine is the front, then allowing the weight being delivered equally across these rainbow arches in the pelvis bone and into the sitting surface that you're on, and not down into that singular direction of this tailbone. And what's so amazing is that just by putting that into your awareness, just correcting a possible misconception, even if you didn't fully think that you fully committed to sitting on your tailbone, simply having any kind of uncertainty at all, as we just discussed, creates a sort of fear, which creates a sort of conflict, which creates disharmony within the body. And our awareness is so strong that just by placing the proper ideas, the proper corrections to possible misconceptions in the ideas, the body is so strong that it can learn to align with this new truth already. just by simply placing it into the awareness of the possibility of there being new ways to look at itself. Speaking of new ways to look at it yourself, hyper responsibility, right? What do you think about hyper responsibility? What do y'all think about hyper responsibility? Does that sound like something that you would want to be part of or not part of? Does it sound scary or not scary? You shouldn't be responsible for everything. Why not? Well, you would never be happy. Well, how do you know? Maybe you're unhappy because you don't take hyper responsibility. Because you constantly leave things in the hands of other people. So you have a constant in the life, which is uncertainty, and you're waiting around, limiting yourself from doing other things because you're waiting on whether or not this other person will take their responsibility or not. But we cannot control anybody else but ourselves. So what good is the energy spent on expecting to control other people, in allowing our happiness to be defined by trying to control other people? Shouldn't we take hyper responsibility because that's all you can do? So shouldn't we be trying to output the most of ourselves into life? Don't we want to put the most of ourselves into our life? So isn't taking hyper responsibility for everything you care about the only way? As your body can only be in one place at a time anyway, right? So isn't taking hyper responsibility for things that you care about, for things that energize you, the things that make you feel good or make you feel happy, isn't taking hyper responsibility and an active role in those things, isn't that more freeing than deciding that it's someone else's responsibility? Doesn't that allow you more freedom to behave, to act when you are at the center, you are at the focal point, when you take hyper responsibility? But that's also a good thing, as now all your energy could be focused on the proper channels of something you can actually affect yourself. Yes, it might not be my fault that I'm getting yelled at by this teacher right here, but why am I even in this class? Maybe I didn't work hard enough to be in a better class where the teacher wouldn't be yelling at me. We don't have to go around blaming these other people and saying that they don't deserve to be doing what they're doing, that they are wrong for feeling the way that they're feeling. But looking at what I want in life, how could I have changed my actions to get closer to what I wanted? Devoid of anybody else, screw everybody else. Who cares what everybody else does? It's about you and what you want, right? It's about what you and what you want. So what could have you done to make sure that that happens? You know? Hyper responsibility. Maybe you can take hyper responsibility for your life, and that would be a good thing, as we could live not in fear, maybe in discomfort, but not in fear. But discomfort can always be overcome and we get stronger for it, but we wouldn't live in fear. Should we take hyper responsibility? As the fear of deciding even who is at fault for most things in life is what causes the most uncomfortability, stasis, arguments, problems, is the arguments of the confusion that's created from the arguments of wondering whose fault it is. Well, don't you just subtract that entire problem? Don't you just reduce that entire issue? Don't you just excise that entire issue out of the problem, out of the question? When we immediately take responsibility for everyone, for everything. When we immediately take responsibility for everything ourselves immediately. No more is this question of whose fault is it? No more blaming. Don't we get immediately to action? It might not be the action that people are trying to define for you from the outside in, but it's at least a proper action. As you're focusing on this self, you can never be wrong. It might just be that you just might need to be quiet in this situation. It might just be that you might just need to exit the situation. That's all you could do for the situation. And that might be. But by taking hyper responsibility and looking at the self, aren't we reducing the amount of stress? You go focus on your life, and whatever it is that's bothering you or what's bothering those people at the moment. If it felt like you can leave, must not have been that important anyway. So it's going to be handled when you're not there. And you possibly even helped that situation as you took hyper responsibility, looked after yourself first, removed yourself from that situation, allowed that situation to metastasize and progress on its own in a more organic way. Maybe taking hyper responsibility for our lives, looking at ourselves first, might be a good thing. As in, why are you even there? Why are you even there being annoyed by this person ranting? If we look at ourselves as we deserve everything we get, well, maybe we don't look at other people and concern ourselves and live in fear of wondering whose fault it is for what we got, but rather look straight at ourselves and say, oh, I deserve what I get. Okay, I'm going to change my action now. No more the confusion of who to act, you to act. Now just what to do. No more living in fear. No more living in victimhood fear of allowing other people to be in control of your happiness. But rather taking hyper responsibility for your happiness. Not in the sense of it's your fault, but in the sense of, hey, you have a say in this. In everything you do get. If it's true that everything you get you deserve, if it's true that you deserve everything you get, the way that hyper responsibility is describing, might be scary at first. It's like, oh my god, if something happens to me, it's my fault. But that's death fearing. In a life loving way, it's more like, oh my gosh, this happened, but hey, you have a say in it. I hope you have been able to feel the weight of the body down the front of the spine and into the rainbow arches all the time. And I really hope you enjoyed this episode of Truth Hurts Day. I really hope you enjoyed this Truth Hurts Day episode on Pago On. Where we talked about hyper responsibility and how that's a good thing, because it's not about, oh, everything is your fault, but you have a say over everything. You are powerful in this window to this godlike experience that you are. You are powerful with this superhero power, self-awareness that you have. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like, a share, and or a subscribe or a follow on Twitch, DLive, or YouTube. We will be back here tomorrow, but a small announcement. We are coming up with some music coming up pretty soon, so you can catch us on TikTok, but they got the DMC stuff going on. But if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Give us a like, send us a DM. Any suggestions, we're open to all of them. And like we said last time, we are looking to open up the gates towards some samples, towards some, maybe if you guys have some inspiring quotes or anything that related to what you've heard, please send any quotes from like animes or movies or something like that in. Really like having those in like the music. Just we might toss it in there like some mushrooms or some spinach. Hyper responsibility, yo. We might feel the need to take responsibility for everything that happens to us. We might feel like we deserve everything we get. But that might be a good thing, as there's no other productive way to look at life. There's no other way that will satisfy you, as we want to spend all of our energy on that one person who can actually affect our ability to get more of what we want in the future. Hyper responsibility. It might be a good thing, as now it is not in other people's hands, your happiness, but rather in your own hands. And it's not as your fault, but rather you now have a say in it. You have some say in this over everything that you care about. If this hyper responsibility thing is sure enough. Remember, everybody, the weight bearing portion of the spine is the front. Say it with me. The weight bearing portion of the spine is the front. The weight bearing portion of the spine is the front. The weight bearing portion of the spine is the front. Say it with me. The weight bearing portion of the spine is the front. Thank you for another Truth Hurts Day. We'll see you tomorrow on Freedom Fridays. I am Herbie with another episode of Padawan. it hurts so good. The truth hurts, but it hurts so good. The truth hurts, but it hurts so good. You should take hyper responsibility of your life because that's the most productive way to look at life. The most productive way to get closer and closer to those things that you want in life. The best way to move away from fear and stop having fear in your life, as we know that fear is coming from wondering even. We know that fear is spouting off from like a geyser, starting off from the idea of even who is to blame. Well, I want you to take hyper responsibility today. I challenge you to take hyper responsibility for your life today, because you do have a say. We'll see you tomorrow on Freedom Fridays. I'm Pagawan. Let the truth set you free, baby. We'll see you tomorrow.